Coming to you from Brick House in downtown Brooklyn, this is 112BK. On the show today, is the third time a charm? We'll talk to the Green Party candidate for New York governor about what he's learned from past attempts. Plus, the Brooklyn Film Festival starts this Friday. We'll hear all about it from the executive director and a filmmaker. Hi, and welcome to the show. I'm Ashley Ford, joined in the studio by producer Ross Tuttle.
Hello, Ashley.
Hello, Ross.
How are you?
I'm pretty good.
Fresh back from Disneyland.
I am fresh back from Disneyland, the happiest place on land.
And you want to talk about it?
Yes, I do want to just tell everybody, especially you, that Disneyland should change its name to the Promised Land. I know that's what Oprah calls her property. Don't ask me how I know that. Just know that that's the case.
Isn't that already a theme park in Florida?
Yeah, but it sounds terrible. I don't want to go there. I want to go to Disneyland. So what else is going on in the world, Ross?
You know, Ashley, so much is going on in the world today. It's so overwhelming. Instead of looking at real headlines, I looked at Reddit Brooklyn headlines.
Fantastic.
And this is what I found. You want to hear?
Yes, hit me with it.
Okay. I saw somebody who posted, where's the best place in Brooklyn to pick up a saxophone? Do you know?
I don't.
I don't. Sorry, we can't help you. A lonesome widow saw a new daughter. This was from an article. Lonesome widow saw a new daughter in her favorite waitress at a Brooklyn diner. At first, she brought a lot of joy into my life, she said. That would not last, according to the New York Times.
What happened?
Well, this is pretty sad. The woman got swindled out of her Canarsie home by this waitress at the diner.
Oh, no.
If you want to read more, go to the New York Times. It's quite a large article about it. Very sad. Someone else says they just booked an Airbnb around Foster and Nostrand.
That's not so far from me. Yeah.
Is it safe?
Oh, is my neighborhood safe? Not for you.
Well, exactly.
How about that?
That was kind of the response they got from some of the Reddit responders. They said, but really, as a tourist, please enlighten us. What is it with you out-of-towners having this notion that large swaths of Brooklyn and New York City are just cesspits of crime, where you will be robbed at every turn? And then someone said, well, the area's mostly safe. Is it nice, they ask? No. And then another one, this is a good one, bars or cafes that would be tolerant or even welcoming of a D&D party? Does anybody know? We want to meet once every 2 weeks.
You know, I think Irv's off of Flatbush actually might be open to something like that. My fiance plays D&D twice a week with 2 different D&D groups. Dungeons and Dragons, for those who don't know.
Does it really need explaining?
I think, you know, you never know. Okay, some people aren't down with nerd culture.
All right. Shireen is telling us she didn't even know she thought it was a drug.
Yes.
Well, it is a drug.
It is a drug, Shireen.
It is a drug.
Don't go, girl. You don't want to mess with that stuff.
Yeah. Okay, and then this was an interesting one. I had to look this up. Mammatus clouds in Sheepshead Bay. Coming by a picture. I was like, what's a mammatus cloud? Do you know what a mammatus cloud is?
What is a mammatus cloud?
Well, I cheated. I looked it up. It means mammary clouds.
A mammary
in Sheepshead Bay, of all places.
Cloud. Wow.
Yeah.
They're probably mine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did it look like a storm?
It did look like a storm.
Excellent.
Okay, and then just also so we know, so we're talking about some real news here. Last week we had the NFL Day of Racial Insensitivity.
We did.
Today is the Starbucks Day of Racial Sensitivity Training. We're going to talk a little bit about that more tomorrow. Shireen, again, who's here, but before was out at a Starbucks just seeing what was going on as they closed the store down and asked all the people to leave so they could have their 4 hours this afternoon.
Oh, yeah, their 4 hours to fix racism in the service industry. Really looking forward to them, you know, putting those man hours towards something worthwhile and hopefully changing the world. On the show today, for a third time, Howie Hawkins will be running on the Green Party line for New York governor. In 2010, he got 1.3% of the vote. In 2014, he got 4.9% of the vote. Jarrett Murphy will talk to him about how he'll best those numbers in a moment. Don't go away.
Memorial Day is the unofficial start of summer, the period when it's okay to wear white slacks, and the annual political campaign season. Dozens of offices are in play this year, but we know the focus is going to be on the top races, like the one for governor. And we know the storylines there will primarily be about the big-name Democrats, Andrew Cuomo and Cynthia Nixon, and the Republican nominee, Marcus Molinaro. But there's simply more to it than that. Voters will have at least one other choice come November 6th. Howie Hawkins is the Green Party nominee for governor on the ballot and in our studio today. Welcome, Mr. Hawkins. Thanks for being here.
Well, thanks for having me.
So tell us a little about yourself.
I'm a recently retired Teamster. I did that for about 2 decades. I did 3 decades before that, mostly in construction. I'm originally from California. Worked when I was in construction in New England, and then I moved to Syracuse, where I was unloading trucks for the last 20 years. But now I'm a free man. I got a little pension, and I can campaign full-time for governor. This is my 3rd time running for the Green Party. 5 years ago, we got 5%, about 200,000 votes, a little short, about the same number as Zephyr Teachout got in her Democratic challenge. And I think that 5% made Cuomo, we sort of was a 1-2 punch, Teachout then us. He said, how do I get those votes? He wants to run for president. And so he moved our way on some issues. We got the ban on fracking wells in the state. We got movement toward a $15 minimum wage. The millionaire's tax got extended. Paid family leave. And most of these issues he was opposed to originally. So I think, we don't have to win the office to make a difference, although we're trying to win. Mm-hmm. And so our slogan this time is demand more. First of all, more means, as Ralph Nader says, we need to raise our expectations of what we expect from government. So much corruption. It's just unbelievable. And these trials are going on now, and I think that's just the tip of the iceberg. And we could spend an hour here. I'll give you stories from my hometown of Syracuse, where people are getting public housing torn down, handed to a upstate SUNY medical university, and then handed over to the private developer Core, which is involved in all these corruption scandals. And we don't have affordable housing rebuilt on that lot. It's just weeds. And I could go on and on. So raise our expectations, demand more reforms like we got last time, and then more than, piecemeal reforms. We really need system change. We need more economic democracy so that people really have the power to set the basic direction for our economy and our society.
How do you describe your politics? Are you a socialist?
Yeah, we say ecological socialism, and that's what I'm talking about, system change. We like to say system change, not climate change. Capitalism is a system of blind, relentless growth. It's consuming the environment. That's unsustainable. And it increases inequality. Every time we go to work, a bunch of us get part of the value we create, and the owners get the rest of it. And they get richer and richer, and we're struggling to pay our bills. So those two issues, they're both life and death issues. Everybody knows about climate change, but poverty kills too. And we know from AP did a survey a few years ago, about half the 80% of the population, I believe, at some point in their life will be on public assistance, unemployed. We all are going to experience that. And we know from life expectancy statistics that poor people die sooner. So it is a matter of life and death. So we think these are serious issues, and that's why we're for system change.
And so taking a step back, people have seen Green Party on the ballot in New York State and here in the city for decades now. And is ecological socialism sort of the core belief of that party? When people hear green, they think ecology, environment. How would you sum up sort of the general philosophy of the party?
Well, we have what we call 4 pillars, and this goes back to the German Greens. It was what they united around: ecology, nonviolence, grassroots democracy, and social and economic justice. And so that's what unites all Greens. But as Greens have had experience in the political system and dealing with the consequences of this endless growth in capitalism that's destroying the environment, more and more are moving to a position of socialism, which is an extension of democracy into the economy. So I would say the Greens are moving toward an ecological socialist position. The national platform adopted a plank that points in that direction last year, or 2016.
Now, one of the things that other third parties, if you want to call them that, do in New York State is fusion voting, where they cross-nominate. Democrat is also working families, Republicans also conservative, and they do that to wield influence, which sounds a lot like what the Greens want to do. They want to push the kind of big guys around. Why don't you guys do that?
I think when you fuse with the Democrats, say for the Working Families Party, you get lost in the sauce and you get taken for granted. Progressive votes are not distinguishable when it comes to the general election. The 5% we got was, everybody knew what we stood for. What those votes for Cuomo were for, how many were Working Families votes, how many were Democratic votes, not so much. It's hard to tell the difference. So I think we have more power being independent. We have more leverage because in the end, the votes on the Working Families line for Cuomo were for Cuomo.
Do you think you draw in voters who would otherwise not vote, or just take Democrats who are on the left and feel disaffected by their party? Who's voting for the Greens?
Both. I mean, we have people that are totally disgusted with the two-party system and just don't want to vote for those candidates, period. And then we have a lot of progressives in the Democratic Party who, depending on the race, they sometimes vote for us and sometimes for the Democrat. And you know, our argument to them is, you know, vote for what you want and make the politicians come to you, and make your vote stand out because it's on the green line. Don't get, you know, taken for granted because you're just in the whole Democratic coalition.
So,
but, you know,
in 2010, you got 1-point-something% of the vote. 2014, as you said, just about 5%. Is there a numerical goal this time? You mentioned earlier you're not necessarily running to win. You don't need to win. But what do you need to get to have apparently more influence than you've had?
Well, the more votes, the more influence we have. I mean, we're going for every vote we can get, and we are making predictions. You know, the bottom line is we need 50,000 votes, so we'll have a ballot line for the next 4-year election cycle, and our local candidates can run on the line without onerous petitioning requirements. And that's the way we believe we're going to build the Green Party into a major party, by electing more and more people locally. We have village mayors, town board members, school board members around upstate. Hopefully the next step are city councilors in the big cities, and then state assembly people and members of Congress. And I think once we have a congressional caucus, when we run a candidate for president, they won't be marginalized by the media. They'll have to pay attention to them. So it's a bottom-up approach.
There's a stereotype about the Green Party, and it looks a lot like you, and maybe to some extent like me. It's white, it's male, it's bearded. You've run for public office 21 times or something. You've not been elected. This is your third time running for governor. Are you the best candidate to kind of take the Green Party to the next level, or is this about just maintaining your ballot position?
Well, look, when I ran in 2014, 2 of the 4 candidates for statewide office were men of African descent. The other was a white woman. When I ran in 2010, we had a slate of 6. 2 were women of African descent, and the other 3 were women. So it was 5 out of 6 were women. The stereotype that we are just white males with beards is not the reality. It's what people that oppose us say. And it's not the truth, so I don't worry about it.
It's interesting. In the past 4 years, the Green Party registration in New York State has increased about 4 times faster than overall voter registration. It's gone up about 23%, which is impressive. It's still a really small part of the overall pool of 12.3 million voters, about 30,000 people. There's been so much disaffection with the two-party system. Given the message, why aren't the Greens bigger than they are?
People enroll in a party in New York State to vote in primaries. We don't have many primaries. We tend to meet and agree on somebody at a convention. So a lot of people who are regular Green voters like to keep that Democratic enrollment so they can vote in primaries. The more important thing is the votes we get, and the most important thing is people that actively participate. And that's where we've grown a lot in the last 8 years since we got the ballot line back in 2010. We've built county organizations in over a dozen counties. And that's where the action really is. That's where you get the grassroots people involved from all kinds of backgrounds and bring them together so they can find their common interests and act on them.
So you have, last I checked, in January, your last filing, a relatively small campaign war chest. It was, I think, about $76. That might have been a statistical blip, but how do you prosecute this campaign, and what are the issues that you'll be emphasizing to try to get a broader base for the party? What do you think are the top agenda items? Well,
we're funded with small donations, and 4 years ago we raised about $200,000, and 76 is the correct amount as of last January. I think we've raised about $6,000 since we just put out our first fundraiser. So we'll raise money, and it's the Bernie Sanders model. My average donation in 2014 was $35. Andrew Cuomo's was $3,500. And he raised millions, but I actually had more donors than he did. So we want people to give a little bit, and if a lot of people give a little bit, we'll have enough. Our issues are, we kind of sum it up, we call for a Green New Deal. And the culmination of the New Deal, as Franklin Roosevelt articulated it in his last State of the Union address, was for a second economic Bill of Rights. So everybody would have the right to a job or a livable income, housing, education, health care, fair markets for small farmers and businesses. And what we add to that is ecological sustainability. That's why we call it a Green New Deal. And that would have been the culmination of the New Deal, and we still, you know, here we are 70 years later, and we don't have it. So that's the core of our program. And it's interesting that that's what the Poor People's Campaign is calling for right now. You know, those basic economic rights plus ecological sustainability. Minus ecological sustainability, that's what the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom raised, the freedom budget that grew out of that, and Martin Luther King's Poor People's Campaign. Those basic economic rights. King called it an economic Bill of Rights. That's what we're fighting for. That, you know, in a nutshell, is what our platform is.
Given those ideas, that philosophy, you know, it's likely Andrew Cuomo will be the Democratic nominee. We know Mark Molinaro will be a Republican nominee. Do you feel as though they are indistinguishable on those issues? Because the question you're going to get in November is, are you just going to play spoiler? Are you going to siphon votes from the left and help elect a Republican?
They're not indistinguishable. There are differences between Molinaro and Cuomo. But it's a question of what you as a voter want. Do you believe if you are willing and able to work, you should have a job? Do you believe that we should have a single-payer public health care system that covers everybody for all medically necessary services at lower costs than we're paying now? Do you believe we need to provide affordable housing, not by wasteful tax subsidies, you know, like the low-income tax credit, which hasn't produced the housing and is very costly, and instead expand public housing? Really high-quality, mixed income, powered by clean energy, scatter site, humanly scaled, not the old projects that isolated and segregated poor people and minorities, but like they do in Europe, where it's mixed income. They're self-sustaining because the more, you know, middle-class folks pay rents that help cross-subsidize the low-income people, and the whole project is fiscally sustainable. Those are the kinds of things that we're advocating. Cuomo isn't. Cuomo is part of this pay-to-play culture of corruption. It's all top-down, trickle-down economics, which both parties practice. They give tax breaks to the rich, and they're supposed to invest, and it comes down to us, and it hasn't. I'm from upstate. We're still depressed. In Syracuse, where I live, when the housing market crashed, we didn't feel it because we were already ranked 100th out of 100 you know, metropolitan areas in the country. Our property values didn't go down. They were already rock bottom. And they haven't moved up much since then because it's still depressed. So we want a bottom-up approach, and that's what these public investments in housing, transportation, a public energy system, a public health care system will lower the cost of living and doing business for the people and for the businesses in New York. You know, the right wing, like Molinaro and the Business Council, will talk about improving the business climate, and they always focus on the income taxes, which they have to pay more of. I want to lower the property taxes by restoring revenue sharing so that the local property taxpayers aren't balancing the state budget, and the state is actually paying for the programs it mandates.
We'll have to leave it there for now, but thank you very much, Howie Hawkins, Green Party nominee for governor, row D.
Yes.
On November 6th. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
I want to have an impact on people's lives.
You'll be fine, right?
I do. I really, really do. How many of you feel that you don't fit the norm? You're out of the box. Raise your hand. Yeah. All right. That's all of us. That's amazing.
The Brooklyn Film Festival has finally come of age. Drinking age, that is. It kicks off its 21st year this Friday. And in these shitty times, per their website, they want us to appreciate good art, because art can thrive in these times. Are there 130 premieres a testament? The programmers think so, but you'll have to be the judge. To tell us about some of the selections, we have Marco Ursino, the festival's executive director. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And Lillian LaSalle, director of one of those premiering films, My Name is Pedro. Thanks for coming on 112BK, Lillian.
Thanks for having me.
Marco, bring us forward. How did the festival get started? Why did it start?
Well, the festival started 21 years ago, and we since then rebranded 3 times. We started as the Williamsburg Brooklyn Film Festival in Williamsburg.
Right.
One venue, and it was the idea of having just one festival, and that was it.
Right.
But that was not it. The festival continued. Then in 2002 we moved to the Brooklyn Museum and became the Brooklyn International Film Festival. And then in 2010 we dropped the international and continued as Brooklyn Film Festival. name changed 3 times, the mission didn't.
Right.
So basically, it is the same festival. Our mission is to discover, expose, and promote independent filmmakers and to draw worldwide attention to Brooklyn as a center for cinema. And when we started saying this 21 years ago, nobody really believed it, and nobody cared.
Right.
And
Now they care.
now they care. And for the first few years, actually, in every poster you could see, you know, just a punchline saying an occasion to cross the bridge,
Right.
you know, because people didn't cross the bridge. Now Williamsburg is what it is.
Yes, it is.
Brooklyn is what it is. And basically the festival is today reaching out to 7 neighborhoods.
Wow.
7 venues. We mostly focus on the north Brooklyn, so we have venues in Dumbo, Williamsburg, Greenpoint, downtown, and Bushwick.
Wow.
And like you said, we show 130 films coming from all over. The selections are made from 2,554 films coming from 120 countries.
Wow. So one of those selections is Lillian's film.
Right.
Lillian, talk to me about your film. Talk to me about, you know, the process of maybe getting into the Brooklyn Film Festival. How did that work?
Well, the film is called My Name is Pedro. It's a documentary. It's my first film. And in fact, I actually had never intended to direct a documentary. I've never directed anything. I am a producer, and I've worked on several films as a producer. But I had this serendipitous moment where I was home one day reading the New York Times, and on the cover of the Metropolitan section was this gentleman named Pedro Santana, who at the time was a middle school principal in the South Bronx. And the article was really interesting. It was called The Principal's Office, and it was, you know, it featured him in a photograph where he's like long flowing hair.
Oh, yeah.
And sort of dancing with his students in what looks like a party. And I tore that article out and I kept it. I was just so inspired by the photograph. And I thought, first of all, I thought that's not what principals look like or do.
Right.
At least not my principal
Not the
from
one
middle
I
school.
remember.
Exactly.
Okay, Mr. Brown never danced with us.
Exactly. So I just was so intrigued by him. And to make a long story short, I called the school. He answered the phone. He agreed to meet with me the next day. And I thought I'd maybe make a narrative feature about his life. But upon meeting him, it was very clear within the first 5 to 10 minutes that he was a walking documentary. I knew nothing about making documentaries, but I knew in that moment, this guy's a documentary, and how do we set out to do that? And I asked him about it, and he said yes. And then, and then getting into the Brooklyn Film Festival, I was very, very excited because I am born, raised, and based in Brooklyn. Brooklyn is near and dear to my heart. When I tell people I was born and raised here, they just are always surprised because they don't meet many people who are originally from Brooklyn.
It's harder and harder, I think, all the time to meet people who are originally from Brooklyn. It's a really unique, I think, at this point.
Yes.
Even though we're in Brooklyn,
Yes.
like it just doesn't, at least for me as a transplant, it doesn't happen super often.
We always say 190 ethnic groups living in Brooklyn.
Yes, which is so interesting and lovely. And I would guess that lends to a greater diversity in the films that you guys see. Would you say that's true?
Absolutely. And again, coming from 120 countries, the films, we try to, when we put together the program, to include as many countries as possible. But obviously, at least 50% of the program is local. So we are looking always constantly for filmmakers that are local and are talented and they can compete at an international level.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
One thing that she mentioned that is very important because it's part of the festival is that the festival mostly focuses on filmmakers at their first or second film. So we don't try to push filmmakers that are already established, rather, discover new talent.
Right. Which absolutely makes sense. What do you see happening in Brooklyn, like especially right now, regarding TV and film? Because you've been doing this for so long. To me, it seems like you would have watched an evolution happen, right?
Yeah, sure. But well, first of all, when we moved to Brooklyn a long time ago, to Williamsburg, I was just telling her, it was a war zone. So it was a dangerous neighborhood. And now people actually move back to Manhattan to save money because it's so expensive.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
So everything is changing so much, and everywhere you look, they're shooting a movie. So
Absolutely.
Brooklyn is becoming the land of movies. It's where it's becoming a cinematic place. There are studios, like very important studios, like Steiner Studios.
Yes.
So
Absolutely.
It's a great place to live and work. You don't need to go to Manhattan anymore.
That is absolutely true. My fiance and I both now live and work in Brooklyn, and we love it. And we love it that it feels so much more like a community. And you're right, like there is always some art making happening, at this point. And Lillian, you have obviously you made your art here in Brooklyn. You've worked on that. You're a Brooklyn girl. What right now, for the people who are like listening to this and they're like, oh, I definitely want to see her film. How do they go see it? When is it screening?
Okay, so we have 2 screenings at the Wythe Hotel.
Oh, I love the Wythe.
Yeah, that's
Okay,
what everyone always says. So
I love the Wythe.
So that's great.
Yes.
The first screening is on June 5th at 10 p.m. And then we have a second screening on June 10th at 4:30 p.m. at the Wythe Hotel Theater.
Fantastic. And Marco, real quickly, how long is the festival going?
It's 10 days long.
10 days long.
We start on a Friday and up the following Sunday. The weekends are full, so we start at 2 p.m. Through midnight in several venues. And while during the week we just do evening shows like 6, 8, and 10 in one show in one screening room, 6:30, 8:30, 10:30 in another one, etc.
So you're going to have a lot of offerings this week, and people can go after work or they can go on the weekends.
And films are shown twice. Every film is shown
Every
twice.
film is shown twice, which is amazing. Good job. I hate it when you miss the film at the festival and it's only shown once. What website can people go to check out the films that are available?
It's BrooklynFilmFestival.org.
BrooklynFilmFestival.org.
Yes.
Thank you both so much for being here. I can't tell you how
having
much
us.
it means.
Thank you
Come
so
back
much.
sometime because I love talking about movies. We're going to keep doing this. And that's the show for today. Thanks for joining us. Tomorrow we'll be back to talk about some transportation issues, namely the MTA and taxi drivers in debt. Hope you can join us.